Hey, happy to be here this week. Yes, those are the NBC chimes that I took from the archives to keep with me and keep me company in quarantine. We are still not back in the museum. The museum is not yet open. We're hopeful that it will happen at a soon time. How's that? To be vague, but if you cannot join us physically at the museum, please join us digitally. We'd love you to become a member. That is going to help us with our next exhibit. And as we open up, it's a struggle for all nonprofits right now. So if you join us for the $49 a year membership, you will also be getting access to $140 worth of classic radio shows. Carl Amari, who has put this together, a board member for us, is just really excited. These are more than 70 free shows that you're going to get. It's $140 value and it's $49 a year. And the reality is you will be supporting us moving ahead from the pandemic. And that is really what we wanted. We want more than anything. We want to give you the radio shows, but we also want to know that you're behind us and that you really think that this is an institution that needs to carry on from here on in. And we believe that it does. And we are working to make sure, but we need you. We can't do it without you. So today I wanted to continue what we started last week, which was meeting some of the staff at MBC. And last week we met Olivia Jackson. We talked to her a little bit about what she does as her vocation and her avocation. And this week we are really, really lucky. We are going to be meeting Aileen. Hi, Aileen.
Hello, Susy. Hello, all you lovely people at home.
Just want you to know it's always good to see my colleagues from the museum since we work virtually. We don't get to see each other enough, and I miss them. So Aileen is the general manager. She predates me, right?
At the museum.
Yes, everybody does. Yeah. Which is great. Tell us a little bit about what you do. What does a general manager? I mean, you've got an executive director. Why do you need a general manager?
That is a great question. So when the museum is open, sort of everybody ultimately reports up to me. So we kind of have different departments and different people in those departments, and those department heads, they roll up to me, and then I roll up to Susy. So I kind of manage all the people, some of them very closely, some of them more loosely because they report to other people. And then I'm also kind of the fill in the blanks, do everything else person. So we are a very small organization. We don't have the resources to have dedicated everything. So I do a little bit of HR. I do all the tech support. I do some research. So kind of whatever the needs are, jump in there and just kind of take care of it.
Mm-hmm. And did you study to be a museum general manager?
I did not. I had no expectation of landing in the museum world. I worked in a museum in high school. I grew up outside Philadelphia, and I worked at the Franklin Institute, which is one of the oldest science museums in the country. And I worked there in high school. They had a program where they would bring in groups, kids groups, mostly Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, stuff like that. They would bring them in for an overnight program. So it was like a science sleepover camp.
Oh, what?
I ended up with that because my boyfriend at the time, who went to a different school, had been doing that. So it let us have some paid sleepover time at the museum while also helping teach children science. So it was a great little scam.
Okay, I don't know if I want to know that. But the Franklin,
like a date.
Pardon me?
It was like a date every Friday. It was lovely.
It actually does sound really lovely. It sounds great to be able to, especially when you are united against a group of children sleeping over. I have to say one of my fondest memories with my boys is the sleepovers we did at museums, but I didn't envy anybody who was running them.
Clean above of 100 kids and their orange juice in the morning is a nightmare. The other side of that, I got to hold a space shuttle tile in my hand and hold a torch to it to show how it cooled, or how it stayed so cool, while going through the atmosphere. So, like, such a cool thing to be able to do, and I'm glad I had that opportunity as a kid.
I think that's really wonderful. And I think the wonder that you brought to that is something that you bring here as well. But you also have great experience, right? It's not as though we plucked you off the street and said, hey, we need you, right?
No, so I actually, in my adult years, I actually have a pretty strong corporate background. Lots of administrative, executive level, project management, all that kinds of good stuff. Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 50 companies, um, and that was great, and that um, certainly had its benefits. But as I got older, and we're not going to say what older is, I realized I really wanted to spend my time doing work that was meaningful, and things that could be dear to me, and things where I felt like I wasn't just advancing corporate agendas, but that I was actually impacting some positive change. Um, so I don't necessarily know that um, preservation and celebration of radio and television would have been a thing that immediately came to mind for me, but an opportunity presented itself at the museum. And it's really allowed me to leverage sort of my really strong administrative background with a more creative and non-traditional environment. So it's really been a fantastic thing to be able to do. And from where I sit right now, I have a hard time seeing myself going back into that 9 to 5 cubicle environment.
Yeah, I mean, and actually, it might be more beneficial for you if you were in the 9 to 5, because this does not feel like a 9 to 5 job at all. It's something that it's really a vocation and an avocation to keep this wonderful little place going.
It
Hmm.
is. And, you know, we're a nonprofit, we're a museum. We're also part of the service industry in a way. We are providing a service, so we keep service industry hours. So I think people look and see general manager of the museum, like that's cushy. Well, it's not. I'm there on the weekends too. That's when people want to come to the museum, so that's when we need to be available. And that's okay.
Right.
Um, but it's sort of an interesting thing that I think people don't always think about.
Right. And the fun part about doing the programs is it does mean that you are there for, then an extra 2 hours at night, 2, 3, 4 hours or whatever on the weekends and things like that. And actually, that's not a complaint. That's a longing. I would love to be back to be doing programs. We know that this is not an era where that is going to happen. And we know that however it comes, it's going to come virtually. But maybe you could talk a little bit about how you see the museum, and because you're involved in it day to day, transforming to really fit this new era.
Absolutely. And to go back to the it's not a complaint, it definitely isn't, because that programming has brought really interesting things. You know, we had an anniversary celebration for Sven Gulli in the fall, and Rich Coase was there, and it was fantastic. But as kind of helping to be a handler for him, I stood in a corner off stage and swapped puns with Sven Gulli. Like, oh my God, I'm a I like to think of myself as a pretty experienced punster, and to be able to swap puns with the master, like, it's the coolest thing ever. So definitely not complaining about having to be there for an extra couple of hours at night for an event.
Mhm.
But you're right, we can't. Putting 100 people in a room is not a thing that we can do right now. That's not a thing we can do, at least for the foreseeable future. So there's that paradigm of how do we refocus ourselves? And I think we've done a little bit of that with um, the new Great Debate series. And I don't know if you guys have checked that out. You should. Has that been announced, Susie? Can I point people with the URL?
You can point people to the URL. We're officially announcing it this week, but I think we can unofficially do the soft rollout here.
So unofficially, sneak preview, you guys. Greatdebates.org. So it talks about presidential politics. And look at Fritz had a graphic handy that I didn't even prep him for. He's good. Um, it talks about broadcasting and the impact it has on presidential debates and campaigns. Um, and it's really precious and interesting to us for a couple of reasons. First, the museum has the camera from the first televised debate. We have one of the cameras from the Kennedy Nixon debate. Happened here in Chicago, was the first televised debate. And I don't think, and why would they have thought of it? I don't think anybody really looked at that moment and said, this is going to change everything. But it turns out it did. And that's sort of where the impetus for this came from. Um, and we looked at that and said, that's where it started. But how did television, how did broadcast continue to change presidential campaigns? How does it affect now? And the other thing that was really cool is that because I think you guys know we're in an election year. Um, because we're in election year, it's so timely and it's so important right now. So we've got the online exhibit. It kind of walks through some of the key um, points of change and disruption where having broadcast changed the face. We also have a high school curriculum. It's a gorgeous curriculum. We've sent it out already to about 1,500 educators. If you know educators that might not have seen our email, please point them toward it. It's on the greatdebates.org page. Um, it's got the workbooks. It's got all of the Common Core references. Um, right now, it's about 5 modules, maybe 6, but we're going to do more as we move closer and closer to the election. That becomes sort of a real-time teaching tool for not parents, also parents if they homeschool, but for teachers to take into their classrooms and keep their students current as to what's going on right now. So it's really cool. And that's one of the ways that we're saying we cannot open the door and have you all come into a program, but here's a way that we can share, our expertise and our position with you guys.
And I think we did a little bit of talking with Al Genie in the past on the show about the presidential election, but some of the baseline things that we're dealing with in this exhibit. But you are right that the curriculum, the reason we're rolling it out now is so that teachers can use it, high school teachers can use it as they plan what they're going to be doing in the fall. And what I find exciting about it is while we planned this exhibit, we had to kind of deconstruct it twice, right? We had to deconstruct it when we realized, oh, well, we're probably not going to necessarily be open right away for it. So let's get something up. And then all of a sudden we realized this is huge. This is much bigger. I mean, as things unfolded and we realized the time that it would take, we thought that we had to be deeper in examining exactly what was going on now. So we have a curriculum module about the pandemic. What's leadership was presidential? How are these candidates campaigning during a pandemic when they're not supposed to be out in larger crowds, right? And what is the summer going to look like? And we're hoping this summer as well to have, this is a big commercial for this, isn't it?
That wasn't the goal, but
we're going to interview Aileen, and guess what? She's going to talk about the museum because she loves it. There we go. But I really think too that the fact that it will be updated. I have I have 2 modules that I'm looking at right now that we started and we're editing about race, about because television has played such a key issue in bringing civil rights to the forefront. There was an exhibit at the museum that closed down DC, but it was all about civil rights. And there was one huge panel where all of the students who started conducting the sit-ins at different counters to be able to sit, in not just a specific place, right? To take away the Jim Crow laws. What they said was, we had been protesting for a while, but the game changed totally when the whole country could see what was going on. And that's what we're seeing now as well. So I'm excited about this, and I know you are. And I'm going to go back to you. I'm not transitioning in an awkward way back to you because I know we're supposed to talk to you. But I wanted to say a little bit more about what you bring to this, because you have such an incredible background too in gaming, right?
I do.
Only not the video gaming, right? Most of the time we say gaming, people think video, right?
Well, both really. I was a child in the 80s. I played Zork on my, I don't know if that means anything to anybody. Zork was a game that was all text, and you typed in "go east," and then it would say, "You're east. Here's what you see." So before we even had graphics in games, I played video games back then. I was also raised on board games. And oh God, 8 or 9 years ago, my partner and I decided, we'd been saying for years, we should open a game store. We should open a game store. And the time was never right. And we finally said, we kind of need to just make the time be right. So we opened a game store and a gaming space, board games, um, in Chicago. It was open for about 5 years. Um, and it was really, we built it and designed it with the mind of really reaching out and providing a safe space for folks that were not necessarily the target gaming demographic. So most gamers, board or otherwise, 17 to 28 straight white men. And we said they have all kinds of places in the city where they can comfortably, safely play games. I'm a woman. I don't know if you guys caught that or not. I am certainly not of that age bracket. My partner is Latino. So we wanted a place that people like us would feel comfortable playing games. And that ended up being gangbusters. That community building was fantastic. People met life partners. They found friendships that they might not have found otherwise. Financially, it was a brand new store. It stayed open for 5 years. That's better than a lot of new businesses do.
Yes.
But what that reminded me and what that brought to me and reminded me of was that power of sitting people around the table and sharing that experience. I love to get in a video game and, do wacky stuff as much as the next middle-aged woman. But you can't replace that power of people sitting around the table and sharing that experience that only happens in that moment. It's almost like theater, not quite as serious, but you can't reproduce that. That moment happened. It's an experience that you all shared, and that will never happen again. And to me, that's a little bit like broadcast when used to sit around and stare at the radio and listen to old radio programs, or with water cooler television, to sit down and share that moment with someone and share your thoughts and your experiences. And in the case of a place like the store, really get those viewpoints and experiences of people who aren't necessarily like you or didn't have the same background as you or the same upbringing as you. So that breaking board game bread, and we did often break bread as well while we played. That was a special thing to be able to do with people.
Well, what I loved is you have brought that whole ethos to the museum, and you've done that with staff. We've had a couple of game nights since I've been there, and they have been really wonderful. They've just been really wonderful. I totally forgot how great it was to sit down around a table, play a game, and really enjoy one another's company and kibitz. It was
there's the side chatter that happens while you're doing that is right. Just as integral to that experience as the actual mechanics of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the experience we're trying to create at the museum, and we hope that we'll be able to create it somewhat virtually. We'd like to make sure that people will be kibitzing this summer as we do programming. We'd like to make sure that they will be also chatting with some of the people, especially some of the teachers that we would like to invite to join us for seminars that we'll be posting. We will be hopefully that they'll be talking and exchanging ideas with maybe some of the people covering politics, as well as some of the political candidates themselves. So we're really hopeful to bring that whole idea, because we do think community, whether it's virtual or whether it's physical, is something that you can build and keep strong. And that's what we are hoping to do at the Museum of Broadcast Communications.
Absolutely. And to kind of go back to, what do we think the future looks like? I think that this pandemic has really pushed us in saying, like, we need to be creating digital content like we're doing right now. And that's another way of engaging our community. You'll see a lot of times when we do content, we ask, what do you guys want to see? Tell us. That's a sincere question. We would much rather be putting together things that we know you want to hear about than what we think you might want to hear about.
We guys had back and forth about what this program should be too.
Right.
And where should this be a place where we talk only about the broadcast world, or should this be a place where we take on the responsibility to broadcast stories that other people are not broadcasting? Right. Can we augment the broadcast world by adding content that will help people understand what's going on in the city of Chicago a little bit more. We know that there are many places to do that, and we certainly support colleagues who are doing that. But we also know that industry is shrinking. And so is it incumbent upon us, since we have a platform, to move ahead and tell different stories? And that's one of the things that we've done in this space.
And being able to do that digitally gives us a much shorter reaction time, response time than we're used to in the past. So we are now in a position where I think it's not a thing you usually think of for a museum. We can shift and we can change our focus. So you guys met Olivia last week. She and I do a weekly Instagram show about reality TV and TV in general. And because that's live and it's digital, we were able to shift the last couple of weeks to really talk about, Black TV and important shows or fun shows by Black creators and Black actors. We were able to talk about Black podcasts. That's one of the things that being digital lets us do. Putting up an exhibit, I had no idea until I came to the museum how much work goes into building and mounting a physical museum exhibit. It's huge and it's expensive and it takes a lot of time. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of refreshing to have that leash be a little bit longer right now and being able to make responsive, timely programming.
I couldn't agree with you more. Tell me a little bit about what you'll be doing on Friday on Instagram, because I think that's interesting.
So on Friday on Instagram, we're kind of now mixing our important Black TV back to reality TV, which is what we normally talk about. This week, we're going to be talking about, so every other week, we either binge a show together or we talk about history of something in television. So it's our binge week. We're going to be talking about the first season of Real Husbands of Hollywood, which is a fake reality show starring Kevin Hart, Nick Cannon, Robin Thicke, Boris Kodjoe, J.D. Smoove, where they actually play themselves because they all have relatively powerful wives, but they're actually playing themselves as characters in this fake reality show. So it's sort of like a Real Housewives spinoff, but it's pretty funny. So if you got a chance, watch the first season. Talk about it with us on Friday.
How many seasons do they have?
They have 4, but we're just going to do the first one.
You're just going to do the first one. That is really, and I understand too that you have since we're getting to know one another a little bit more in front of everybody, that you just want to put me totally on the spot, don't you?
I do. So it's a thing that Olivia and I do on our show, Real Drama. We always have a quiz to make the other one remind the other one how little they know. So I thought I'd bring a little bit of that here with me to this show. So I have it's a 1-question quiz for Susy this week. I think we're going to show you a couple of pictures. I think Fritz has some long ago pictures of me. And Susy, I want you to...
Can we just thank Fritz, by the way, Fritz Goldman, for engineering all of this. We are so lucky to have him.
Awesome. And after you look at these 2 pictures, Susy, these are both from my senior year yearbook. I want you to look at the clothes and the fashion, and I want you to tell me within 3 or 4 years what year this was. What year was I a senior in high school? I feel like the hair is really the selling.
Definitely the 80s. No, 90s.
It was 90. So you were close.
So it was 1990?
1990. Yep.
I was gonna say 89, but that.
I guess if I graduated in 90, those pictures were probably taken in 89. So ding, 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 ding.
I'm right.
You're right on it.
It's always amazing when I'm right. And the nice part about it is if I'm wrong, everybody will tell me.
So the hair was still big, but it was we were starting to get slightly smaller hair at that point. And so many hours wasted with a curling iron.
And tell me one more time, where did you grow up?
Outside Philadelphia.
Outside Philadelphia. That is great. That is really, really, really great. And so, I I succeeded in the quiz.
Well done.
I'm thrilled about that. This is a moment, and I am wondering, What is it that you would like to hear from people out there? I think we've said a little bit of it, but we would really like to hear what they would like to see. We've been hearing a lot of back and forth on our Facebook page about what people's preconceived notions about who we are and who we should be. And we are shattering some of those walls. We do think it is our place to talk about what is going on in the Chicago community. We do think it is our place to enter into discussions or bring voices that haven't been heard out. What else do you think that we? How do you see this era in the museum, besides the fact that we are closed, which is a big one, in change?
I think that this is such an interesting time. Um, I was out in one of the early marches, and I couldn't help but look around and say, "This is revolution." Like, the world is changing around us. I believe for the better, but this isn't the place for that discussion. But it's changing so rapidly, and to be in this position where we can help people tell stories that maybe you couldn't have heard, you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 6 months ago.
Right.
To be a part of helping to have those stories heard, and you know, within reason, counterpoint to those stories, because most stories have two sides, um, and I think sometimes it's worth hearing both sides of the story.
And
I'm going to qualify that and say not always.
well, I will say that more than two sides to every story. There's usually
Sure.
a number of sides to stories. And so to be able to bring that nuance out, to be able to do that is something that I think we find exciting. Storytelling is the reason, and education is the reason that I was brought in. And I know that's a turn that you're excited about as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think we have a very interesting and fun and dynamic team. It's small but mighty, and we are forging ahead to make sure that we do have a pretty good future. We're hoping that you will join us back here next week for our happy half hour that we love, and that we are still defining. And we hope that maybe you will take a moment in the comment section below to talk about what it is that you would like to see. Again, I appreciate all of the people who want to tell us what we shouldn't be, but I would prefer that we, in this era, where there's a lot of negativity, I would prefer that we have a fulsome discussion that has a positive bent to it. Don't tell me what we shouldn't be. Tell me what we should be. Tell me where we need to go. Tell me the direction you're interested in. Tell me what you miss. I think that would be really important for all of us to hear. Don't you think?
And I do, and tell us where you see holes that maybe we're blind to. Um, where you see things that people aren't hearing or seeing that we can help bring to light.
I think that would be great. I think it would be wonderful. I am so pleased that you were here on the show as if you had a choice.
I was pleased to be here.
But I'm really, really glad to bring the faces that are behind the scenes in front of the camera, because it is a wonderful group of people, and it's great for people to know, again, who's pulling the strings and who has the control. And we know Aileen has the control, so that's the most important thing.
Often.
Yes, 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 yes. So, thank you so much, and thank you to your cat who was quiet during this whole thing. It was very kind.
I was so thrilled. He'll often make an appearance right here across my desk, so he was kind.
He's delightful during meetings. He's really a good pal for all of us to keep us happy. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking the time, and I'm looking forward. I hope everybody else is, to seeing the show on Instagram at 5:30 on Friday. It's a wonderful way to kind of kick off your after your whole weekend by talking about something crazy and fun and wonderful like reality TV. So thank
And
you,
thank
Miss
you.
Aileen.
And thank you as always to Fritz for producing for us today.
Yay, Fritz, yay, Fritz, yay, Fritz. Okay, thank you, and hopefully we will see you back here next week.
Bye guys.
Bye.